So this is the warm-up for the lesson on solving two-step equations. I'm going to go through each of the three warm-up problems. You should be familiar with these from previous lessons, but just to kind of refresh your memory. I'm not going to go through the check piece of this because we're going to actually do some checking later on in the lesson itself. So this will just walk through and make sure that you have the answer correct. And we'll be kind of writing all over just to make sure I have enough room to get through everything. So problem 1, the 3x equals negative 18. We're going to divide each side by 3 because the 3 is being multiplied to the x, and the opposite operation with multiplying is division. So we're going to divide each side by 3, giving us x equaling negative 6. So x equaling negative 6 there is our answer. Problem 2. Negative 7 equals x over 6. Remember that the slash represents a fraction bar, and that fraction bar also represents division. I'm going to get the x by itself, so the opposite of division is actually multiplication. So I'm going to multiply each side by 6. When I multiply, I use parentheses. That's just the notation type that I use in order to distinguish between all four operations. Negative 7 times 6 gives you negative 42. So the answer to the second problem is that negative 42 equals x. Problem number 3. Notice that it says expression. So this is not an equation. We do not have an equal sign, and we're not actually going to be solving for what x represents. We're just going to be trying to simplify or shrink this down as small as we can. First thing you always need to do is you need to change subtraction to plus the opposite, so we're going to make that plus negative 4. Next step, distribute through any parentheses that you may have. So 3 times x is 3x. 3 times 2 is 6. Plus negative 4 plus 1 times negative x is negative 1x. And 1 times 7 is 7. We're going to combine like terms now. And remember that like terms match based on their variable. So the 3x, the negative 4x, and the 1x are all like terms. And you may add these together in any order you want. 3x plus negative 4x is negative 1x. Negative 1x plus negative 1x is negative 2x. I then have the 6 and the 7, which end up matching, and these would be constants. They don't have any variable attached to them. So 6 plus 7 gives me 13. And this is my final answer. It's a simplified form of what I started with, the 2x plus negative 13. Now we're going to work on solving two-step equations. It's going to be a similar process to one-step equations, but obviously we're going to be adding an extra step. We are going to need to check these as well. We're going to start moving through the lesson for today. Today we're going to work on checking them, and we're going to work on solving basic two-step equations. You should have a graphic organizer in front of you that we will use as we work through example 2. So here's example 1 on checking solutions. We're going to start here. I'm going to show you how to check, and then we'll work on solving. So here I'm telling you already that x equals 4. Okay? Somebody else already solved it. They want to know if their answer is right. Everywhere you see x in the original problem, we're just going to plug in 4. So 3x, we're taking the x out and we're putting 4 in instead. So take the x out, put the 4 in. Again, I usually use parentheses. It's just the notation type that I use. I'm going to change my subtraction to plus the opposite, so plus negative 1 needs to equal 11. At this point, we're going to follow order of operations. So 3 times 4 is 12, plus negative 1 needs to equal 11. Oh, I got too many 1s in there, so let's get rid of that one. So 12 plus negative 1 needs to equal 11. 12 plus negative 1 does in fact give me 11, so my answer does check. And this is what we're looking for when we check our solutions. We want the two sides to match. That tells us that our answer is right. So here I have two practice problems on checking solutions. What I would suggest is that you pause the video at this point. You try each of them on your own. and then you turn the video back on and see if your work ends up matching mine as I explain through it. So again, I would get out some scratch paper, I would pause it at this point, and then turn it back on when you're ready. So, once you've finished doing the work on your own, we're going to come back in and we're going to compare our answers. In this first problem, first thing I'm going to do is change that to a plus negative 10, changing the subtraction. Everywhere I see x, I'm going to plug in 18. So negative 7 equals 18. Oh, let me get my 8 right. There we go. Divided by 6 plus negative 10. Again, following order of operations. 18 divided by 6 is 3 plus negative 10. 3 plus negative 10 does in fact give me negative 7. So these answers do check. So 18 is a solution. So your answer would be yes, 18 does in fact work. So now I'm going to try the same type of process, but this time everywhere I see x, I'm going to plug in negative 2. So negative 17 equals 4 times negative 2 plus 9. Make sure you follow your integer operation rules. 4 times negative 2 is negative 8 plus 9. Negative 8 plus 9 is actually positive 1. These do not match. They are not equal. Negative 17 does not equal number 1. So negative 2 is not a solution to the problem. At this point, if you got an answer that doesn't check, we would go back through and try to figure out what we did wrong. Because we don't have all the steps of how the equation was solved at this point, we can't go back and do that. At this point, you're going to want to pull out that graphic organizer. The graphic organizer is going to have the steps listed down the side, and it's going to have 2 practice problems for you. What I actually want you to do is I want you to keep those 2 problems for a little later on. I'm going to work through some practice problems with you now, showing you the steps, and then I'm going to ask you to try and check those 2 on the graphic organizer by yourself, using the steps listed down the side to kind of refresh your memory. So here's some practice problems. I'm going to start with the first one, the 3x plus 7 equals negative 5. I will be solving and checking these. So starting with the first one, we have 3x plus 7 equals negative 5. Remember that you can pause this at any point to make sure you're following along. First thing you want to do, as always, is check for any subtraction, change any subtraction to plus the opposite. Also check your variables. If you do not have a number in front of a variable, please go ahead and put a 1 in front of that variable. This variable has a 3 in front of it, so we're actually okay at this point. I'm going to go ahead and erase that line because I don't want that to confuse us later on. When you're solving 2-step equations, you have 2 pieces. You have the piece with the variable, and you have the piece without the variable. When you're solving 2-step equations, we're always going to move the piece without the variable first. No matter where that piece is, the piece without the number on the same side of the variable is always going to move first. So I'm actually going to get rid of the 7 first by adding negative 7 to each side of my equation. This gives me 3x equaling negative 12. At this point, it should remind you of a 1-step equation that we worked on yesterday. Now we're going to get rid of the 3 here that's with the x. That 3 is being multiplied, so in order to get rid of the 3, we're going to divide each side by 3 because that's the opposite operation. Remember, with multiplication and division, you don't change the sign. Whatever number you want to get rid of is the number you divide or you multiply by. Negative 12 divided by 3 is negative 4. So right now I'm saying my answer is negative 4. I'm not certain on that yet because I obviously haven't gone through and checked it. So now I'm going to check. Always go back to the original problem. But this time, everywhere I see x, I'm going to plug in negative 4. So 3 times negative 4 plus 7 is equal to negative 5. Negative 12 plus 7 needs to equal negative 5. Negative 5 does in fact equal negative 5, so my answer checks. So I know that my answer is good to go. A lot of students try to shorten their checks. You don't want to do that. I know you're probably thinking, I can do this top problem right here in my head. I don't need to show this step of work. I don't need that. Well, and the answer is you actually do end up needing that. Because as we increase our problems longer and longer, you're not going to be able to start here and do it in your head. But if you get in the habit of showing all your work now, it's going to be a lot easier as we continue to move forward. So this is the answer to the first one. At this point, I actually need to erase my screen so that we can look at the second problem together. So bear with me just a minute as I get ready to erase once I find my eraser tool. There it is. Okay. Erase. It doesn't want to erase. Okay, let's try again. Perfect. Oh, nope, still there. Okay, let's try again. Oh, that's not what I want to do. All I want to do is erase this. Apparently it doesn't want to let me. Alright, get rid of that. Get rid of that. Now I think we're good. Alright, problem number 2. 4x plus 1 equals 5. Again, I'm going to get rid of the 1 first because it's the piece without the variable. So I'm going to add negative 1 to each set. So 4x equals 4. Divide by 4. Divide by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to check it. So 4 times 1 plus 1 needs to equal 5. And again, remember, I'm telling you, you could probably do this in your head and say, yes, it checks, but you really want to get in the habit of showing all the steps. I know it seems tedious for now, but it will actually help you in the future. 5 equals 5, and my answer does check. There are 2 more problems, just like the first 2, that I would encourage you to try, as well as the 2 on your graphic organizer. Remember, especially in problem number 3 over here, changing that to an N doesn't change anything. It's just a different letter instead of an X. If you prefer an X, by all means change that N to an X. It's not going to hurt anything. Obviously, homework being a worksheet, you should have that with your stuff as well. Try what you can. Remember that you must check. Okay, and I will be looking for those checks tomorrow as part of your homework. If you have any questions, please see me in class tomorrow.